The air burns colder than death itself. What would it feel like to fight in a city of ice and fire, where every breath could be your last? I'm your guide on forgotten history tales. Step with me into Stalingrad's frozen hell. The air burns my lungs as I breathe. It is not fire that sears me, but the cold, an iron cold that gnaws into marrow, sharper than any bullet. I stand among ruins that no longer resemble a city, though once this place bore the proud name, Stalingrad. The snow drifts between shattered factories and broken apartments, settling over corpses that no one dares to bury. The silence is broken only by the distant roar of artillery and the crows that wheel above the Volga, feasting on the dead. I take you with me, here, into this place where winter itself became a weapon, where men froze standing up, their fingers locked forever around rusted rifles, where life was measured not in weeks, not even days, but in hours, sometimes minutes. Picture this. A soldier stumbles through the ruins of Red October factory. His boots crunch glass and ice, though he scarcely notices. His foot is already frostbitten, toes blackened like coal. Around him, walls gape open, riddled with bullet holes, while the skeletal remains of machines lean like dead giants. Then, from the darkness, a shout in German. The soldier swings his rifle, but his hand does not obey. His frozen muscles fail him. A shot cracks. He falls. The snow drinks his blood, steam curling into the frozen air. This is Stalingrad, January 1943. This is the frozen hell that swallowed 2 armies whole. I stand in the heart of a battlefield that has become a graveyard of empires. The German Sixth Army, once a spear point that slashed across the steppes with unstoppable force, is now trapped in a white coffin. Encircled by the Red Army, cut off from supplies, their world is shrinking into despair. The temperature plummets to minus 30 degrees Celsius. Food is a fantasy. Men gnaw on frozen horseflesh, leather belts, even wallpaper paste. Hunger twists their stomachs, while cold cracks their skin until blood leaks into their gloves. And still, the fighting rages. For the Soviets, too, this is no victory banquet. The Red Army bleeds in the rubble. They move among the ruins like shadows, freezing, starving, but burning with a single, relentless order from Stalin himself. Not a step back. And so, the city itself becomes alive, every brick, every sewer, every frozen river crossing. A city transformed into a monster that devours both hunter and hunted. The sounds of Stalingrad are not just gunfire. They are the brittle snap of frozen bread rations, the hollow cough of dying men, the creak of boots stiff with ice. I hear it all around me. German soldiers clutch each other in pits, sharing body heat, whispering prayers to a God who seems to have abandoned them. Soviet conscripts crawl through shell holes, knives clutched tight, waiting for the scream of "Ura" that drives them forward in suicidal rushes. I walk through this battlefield in my mind, and I feel the psychological war raging alongside the physical. Fear was not just of bullets or bayonets, it was of frost, of famine, of being forgotten. For the Germans, the proud dream of a 1,000-year Reich now lay shattered in ice. For the Soviets, survival was fused with vengeance. Every soldier carrying the memory of villages burned, families slaughtered. The city smells of death. It seeps from the basements where civilians still huddle, children wide-eyed in the dark, their breath steaming in the bitter cold. It lingers in the trenches where bodies freeze so solid that bayonets bounce off them. And above all, the Volga River, once a flowing artery of the motherland, now lies frozen, a white expanse stalked by Stukas and artillery shells. Yet across it, night after night, the Soviets ferry men and supplies, knowing most will never return. Stalingrad is not just a battle, it is a myth forged in blood and frost. I see the outlines of men who became more than human. Pavlov and his house, held against tanks for weeks. Chuikov, the Soviet commander who lived beneath the rubble, swearing never to retreat. Paulus, the German general, trapped in his own pride, waiting for salvation that never came. Every ruin is a shrine. Every frozen corpse is a relic. And yet, within this mythic struggle, I sense the terror most clearly not in the grand stories, but in the silence of ordinary men, clutching rifles with numb fingers, praying only to see the next dawn. As I guide you through this frozen hell, I feel the weight of inevitability pressing in. The Sixth Army is starving, freezing, dying by the thousands. Yet still they fight. Still they cling to the ruins of a city that will not let them go. But what happens when despair meets orders from Berlin that demand the impossible? When soldiers must choose between obedience and survival? That choice, terrifying, human, and inescapable, awaits us in the next chapter of Stalingrad's nightmare. The cold does not relent. It sharpens with every breath, slicing into the lungs of the trapped men of the Sixth Army. I walk among them in my mind, their faces hollow, eyes sunken, uniforms stiff with frost and filth. They cling to orders from Berlin like talismans, each message from Hitler declaring that relief is coming, that salvation marches on steel treads across the steppe. Yet as days pass, the hope withers. Relief is a ghost, heard, believed in, but never seen. I see Paulus, the commander of this doomed army, huddled in a freezing headquarters. His maps are nothing more than dreams now, colored arrows across a city that is no longer a city. He has been told to hold, to endure, to fight to the last. But his men, his once proud army, are breaking. They are no longer soldiers of conquest. They are prisoners of snow. His staff speak in whispers, some daring to utter words like surrender. But Paulus cannot. He is chained by duty, by loyalty, by the Führer's voice that crackles over the radio like the voice of fate. Outside, the soldiers turn to madness to quiet their hunger. A crust of bread becomes treasure, a frozen rat a feast. They boil snow in broken helmets, the liquid tasting of rust and soot. And still, the Soviets press closer, tightening the noose. The Red Army is not untouched by suffering. Their losses are monstrous, their dead frozen into the very ground they fight upon. But they know the tide has shifted. For the first time since the German invasion, they can smell victory. In the shattered factories, combat is more intimate than anywhere else on Earth. I feel the walls close in, hear the rasp of breath echoing through stairwells. Soldiers fight room by room, floor by floor. A single machine gun nest might hold a building for days. Grenades roll across concrete like dice, deciding who lives, who dies. And above all this, the cold lingers, an impartial executioner. If bullets do not claim you, frost will. If frost spares you, hunger will gnaw you hollow. There is a cruelty in how nature conspires with war. Fingers freeze to rifle triggers, and men cannot pull them free. Wounds that might once have healed now fester in the cold, black with infection. Horses, once proud, once vital to supply, are slaughtered and consumed, their blood steaming in the bitter air as men cut flesh with shaking hands. I watch as soldiers who once marched like conquerors now crawl into cellars and refuse to leave, staring at walls with vacant eyes, their minds broken before their bodies. And yet, amidst this frozen nightmare, the German soldiers still receive orders. They are told to stand firm, told relief will arrive, told that they are the bulwark of the Reich. But outside the pocket, The relief force, Operation Winter Storm, has already failed. The panzers could not break through the Soviet encirclement. The Sixth Army is abandoned, though no one dares to speak the word aloud. Inside Stalingrad, rumors seep like smoke. No help is coming. The noose is tightening. They are alone. The Soviets sense the weakening resolve. I hear the calls of Ura echoing across the ruins, waves of infantry charging, bayonets flashing in the half-light of a winter dawn. Behind them, Katyusha rockets scream into the sky before crashing into German lines with thunder that shakes the frozen ground. The earth itself seems to groan beneath the weight of war. The Soviets do not give respite. They press and press, knowing every day brings the Germans closer to collapse. I feel the moment when despair becomes heavier than obedience. German soldiers begin to desert, not to the Soviets, for fear of execution, but into death itself. Some wander into the snowfields, removing their coats, sitting down quietly to let the cold finish them. Others, fevered with hunger and frostbite, mutter prayers that dissolve into delirium. Their comrades scarcely react. Death has become so common that it no longer stirs shock, only resignation. But still Paulus waits. Still he believes, or forces himself to believe, that surrender is not his choice to make. His men die in thousands, but he holds on to the Führer's command. I see him in those final days, his uniform neat despite the ruin, his face pale, haunted. He is a man trapped not just in a city, but in his own obedience. The Soviets move closer now, block by block, street by street. The Volga remains frozen, a lifeline of men and supplies streaming across the ice. Stalingrad's ruins echo with the sound of Soviet boots, with the chants of vengeance, with the shriek of artillery that has never once ceased since the battle began. The hunters are becoming the hunted. The Sixth Army is being swallowed whole, and yet there is still one more cruelty to come. For when surrender is whispered in the frozen dark, Berlin's voice answers with rage. Hitler will not allow it. He commands Paulus not to yield, not to save his men, but to sacrifice them in the name of an empire already dying in the snow. What happens when a commander must decide between his oath and the lives of an entire army? That terrible decision, delayed, resisted, but inevitable, lies just ahead. The city waits, the frost waits, and the shadow of surrender begins to fall over Stalingrad. The snow is no longer white. It is gray, stained with soot and ash, spotted with the rust red of frozen blood. I move through the ruins of Stalingrad as January deepens, and the final act of this frozen tragedy begins to unfold. The men of the Sixth Army are ghosts now, skeletal figures wrapped in rags, eyes hollow, beards matted with frost. Their uniforms once carried the pride of conquest, but now they hang loose on emaciated frames, reduced to nothing but rags over skin and bone. Everywhere, I feel the weight of inevitability pressing in. The Soviets tighten their grip, closing the ring street by street, building by building. Chuikov's men push relentlessly, crawling through sewers, bursting from cellars, appearing like phantoms in the smoke. The Germans fight back, but their bullets are few, their grenades scarce, their tanks frozen and fuelless, standing like statues amid the ruins. The city is a labyrinth, and in that labyrinth, the hunters and the hunted switch places daily, until exhaustion makes them indistinguishable. I hear the voices of desperation in every corner. A German soldier clutches a crumpled letter from home, fingers trembling, lips cracked from frostbite, as he reads words that feel like they belong to another world. Another huddles in a cellar, clutching a rusted tin of horse meat, refusing to share, his comrades watching with hollow stares that betray both pity and murderous hunger. Men fight over scraps, over shadows, over survival itself. The medical stations, if they can be called that, reek of rot. I step into one in my mind, and the smell overwhelms me. Limbs blackened with frostbite, wounds crawling with infection. Surgeons work without anesthetic, sawing through bone as men bite leather straps to muffle screams. Bandages are rags stripped from the dead. Some wounded beg to be left behind, knowing each day brings only more pain. Others plead to be shot, and sometimes their comrades oblige, quietly, in the dark. Paulus sits in his headquarters, a ruined department store turned command post. Maps are spread before him, but they are maps of fantasy. His telephones ring with reports of collapse, regiments reduced to dozens, companies to handfuls. He knows now the truth. Relief will not come. Berlin demands the impossible. Hitler's words arrive by radio, cold as the winter itself. Capitulation is impossible. The Sixth Army will stand fast to the last soldier and the last round. I imagine Paulus hearing those words. His face betrays nothing, but inside he is being torn apart. He is not a coward, nor a man without honor, but he is trapped between duty to his Führer and duty to his men, between obedience and survival. And so, he delays. He waits. He watches his army bleed into the snow, unable to make the one choice that could end their suffering. The Soviets know the end is near. Their artillery hammers day and night, grinding the pockets smaller and smaller. Rockets shriek across the sky, lighting the frozen ruins in brief flashes of fire. Soviet loudspeakers blare messages over the snow. Paulus, save your men. Lay down your arms. You are surrounded. The voices echo through the ruins, haunting the starving soldiers. Some curse them, some weep, some listen in silence, wishing their general would obey. I walk through the trenches now, and I hear the silence more than the gunfire. The fighting is still brutal, still hand to hand, still merciless. But between the clashes, there is silence. Men sit slumped in corners, staring into nothing. A German soldier lifts his rifle to fire, but his hand trembles too much to aim. Across from him, a Soviet conscript grips a bayonet, his eyes wild, his body shivering uncontrollably. Both are young, both are broken, and yet both are bound to kill each other in the ruins of a city neither will ever forget. The civilians, too, remain in this frozen hell. In basements, children cling to mothers, their cheeks hollow, their eyes too large for their faces. They hear the fighting above, feel the walls shudder with each shell. Some cling to hope that the Soviets will bring liberation. Others simply wait for death, too weak to care who wins. Stalingrad is not a city of the living anymore. It is a mausoleum, a monument built on suffering. The noose closes further. January bleeds into its final days, and the Sixth Army is carved into fragments, pockets of resistance in a sea of Soviet firepower. Paulus can no longer command a unified army. He commands fragments, shadows. Yet Berlin still insists, fight on. Surrender is betrayal. The words weigh heavier than the frost itself. And then comes the breaking point. The Soviets launch their final offensive, their armies surging forward, overwhelming the starving Germans. Whole divisions vanish in days. Paulus is cut off, trapped in the heart of the city, while his soldiers crumble around him. The Soviet tide rises, inexorable, unstoppable. I stand at his side as the fateful decision finally nears. His officers beg him to act, to spare what remains of his men. The Soviets are at the door, their artillery pounding like thunder over the Volga. Paulus stares at his maps one last time, his eyes hollow, his voice flat. The words he must utter are both liberation and damnation. The frozen hell is almost at its end, and in the heart of the ruins, the question that has haunted every man here will finally be answered. Will Paulus break his oath? Or will the Sixth Army be buried to the last man in the snow of Stalingrad? The moment of surrender hangs in the air, suspended, inevitable, waiting only for his lips to give it voice. The pounding of Soviet artillery is unceasing now, a drumbeat that shakes the frozen walls around Paulus's command post. Dust falls from the ceiling with each impact, settling onto maps that no longer matter, onto faces that have aged 10 years in 10 weeks. Outside, the ruins of Stalingrad echo with the roar of tanks and the crackle of gunfire, but inside this cellar of concrete and despair, another sound dominates, the hollow silence of decision delayed too long. I linger here at the side of General Friedrich Paulus as the final threads of the Sixth Army unravel. He has received Hitler's order, that cold and merciless decree. Surrender is forbidden. The Sixth Army will fight to the last soldier. The words cling to him like chains. His staff plead with him. There is nothing left, no food, no ammunition, no hope. But Paulus sits rigid, eyes fixed on nothing, his will shattered by the impossible conflict between loyalty and survival. The Soviets are closing in. Their lines tighten like a steel fist, cutting the pocket into fragments. In the northern districts, German regiments simply disintegrate, some surrendering en masse, others vanishing beneath the Soviet tide. I hear the cries of men throwing down rifles, their hands lifted in trembling surrender, their eyes filled with shame and relief. Others still resist, fighting with bayonets and spades, but their courage has no meaning against overwhelming firepower. Inside the ruins, desperation takes on grotesque shapes. Soldiers gnaw on frozen leather, chew bark stripped from beams, drink melted snow thick with ash. Men collapse mid-step, too weak to rise, their bodies claimed by the frost before anyone can drag them inside. Discipline has dissolved. Order exists only in the mind of Berlin, far away, untouched by the horror. And then the final blow falls. The Soviets launch Operation Ring, their great tightening strike, blasting the Germans back into smaller and smaller cages of rubble. The northern pocket collapses first, the southern follows. Paulus himself is cut off, surrounded within the very heart of Stalingrad. I feel the weight of history pressing in on him as the Soviet envoys arrive, demanding surrender. For days he resists, saying nothing, his lips pale, his voice dry. He knows Hitler expects him to die here, to choose death over dishonor. The Führer even sends him a promotion, to Field Marshal, a title heavy with implication. No German field marshal has ever surrendered. The message is clear. Paulus is to die with his army. But Paulus does not raise a pistol to his temple. He does not martyr himself for Hitler's pride. Instead, on the 31st of January 1943, he bows to reality. He surrenders, quietly, without ceremony, without resistance. In the frozen cellar of a ruined department store, the commander of the proud Sixth Army yields to fate. The news spreads like wildfire through the ruins. For some soldiers, it brings relief. The nightmare is over. Their suffering finally has an end. For others, it is humiliation, a collapse of everything they were told to believe. Many feel nothing at all, too numb, too broken to care. They march into captivity like shadows, trudging through snow in endless columns, surrounded by Soviet guards. And what captivity awaits is no salvation. Of the 90,000 taken prisoner, only a fraction will ever see home again. The rest will vanish into camps, consumed by starvation, disease, and the long shadow of vengeance. For them, surrender is not mercy. It is merely another chapter of torment. I watch as the city falls silent, its guns finally stilled. Stalingrad is no longer a battlefield. It is a grave. The ruins are filled with the frozen corpses of both armies, strewn in streets and cellars, stacked in heaps, entombed beneath rubble. Civilians creep out from hiding, their faces pale, their eyes hollow, moving among the ruins like specters. For the Soviets, it is victory, hard-won, unimaginable, mythic. For the Germans, it is catastrophe, the death of an army, the shattering of invincibility, the turning of the tide. Hitler rages in Berlin, his voice crackling with fury over the radio, declaring betrayal, condemning Paulus as a coward. But here, amid the ruins, those words are meaningless. Here, there is only silence, only the snow, only the weight of what has been lost. And yet, as I stand amid the frozen wreckage, I feel that Stalingrad is not finished. The guns may have fallen silent, but the consequences will roar for years to come. The Reich has been dealt a wound from which it will never truly recover. The Red Army has gained a momentum that will carry it westward, all the way to Berlin. And the men who survived, on both sides, will carry these scars forever. But even as the armies move on, even as the war continues, one truth remains. Stalingrad itself is more than a battle. It is a myth, a warning, a frozen hell carved into the soul of humanity. And for those who walked through its ruins, who fought and froze and starved here, it will never end. Yet the story does not close with surrender, for what follows, the aftermath, the reckoning, the memory, is as haunting as the battle itself. Stalingrad does not simply end, it echoes, and those echoes will shape the fate of millions. The city stands in ruins, but its shadow grows larger still. The snow settles over Stalingrad like a shroud, covering rubble, corpses, and the wreckage of an army. The thunder of guns has ceased, yet the silence is not peace. It is the stillness of exhaustion, of a city drained of blood. I walk through those ruins in my mind, and every step feels heavy with ghosts. The surrender is done, but the story has not ended. It has only shifted, becoming something darker, more enduring. Columns of prisoners shuffle through the ruins, boots scraping on ice, their heads bowed against the wind. 90,000 men march eastward into captivity. Their faces are gaunt, their bodies wasted, many too weak to stand. They lean on each other, dragging comrades forward because to fall is to be left behind. Soviet guards watch in silence, some with pity, others with cold contempt. I feel the hopelessness in the air, heavier than the frost. These men fought until their bodies betrayed them, and now their fate lies in hands that remember the burning of villages, the massacres, the cruelty of occupation. The road into captivity is a death march. Dysentery, typhus, frostbite. Each mile claims more lives. I see them stumble into ditches, snow covering them like earth. By the end of this journey, only a fraction will still draw breath. Of those 90,000, barely 6,000 will ever return to Germany, years later, broken shadows of the men who once crossed the steppes as conquerors. For the Soviet soldiers, the victory is colossal, but it is not triumph without cost. Their own dead lie frozen in heaps, their bodies scattered in fields and ruins, their sacrifice unimaginable. Entire divisions have been erased, but the survivors stand taller now. They have proven that the invincible can be broken. I hear their voices, hoarse with exhaustion, whispering words of pride and vengeance. In their eyes burns the certainty that the tide of war has shifted. Stalingrad itself is a scar across the earth. Buildings lie gutted, their walls jagged teeth against the gray sky. Streets are filled with wreckage, twisted steel, shattered glass, tanks burned into hulks of blackened iron. Civilians creep out from their cellars, emerging like creatures from caves. Their eyes are hollow, their skin pale from months without light. They search the ruins for food, for warmth, for family members who may never return. I see them step over frozen corpses as though stepping over stones. Death has become too familiar to stir horror. And yet, in the midst of ruin, life clings on. Fires flicker in makeshift stoves. Bread is baked from whatever scraps of grain can be found. Children play among rubble, their laughter thin but real. Stalingrad refuses to die, even as it lies shattered. The psychological echoes ripple far beyond the Volga. In Berlin, Hitler rages, denying reality, refusing to accept that an entire army has been lost. His speeches grow more frantic, his confidence more brittle. The myth of German invincibility has cracked, and the world hears it. Allies in London and Washington whisper that the turning point has come. The war will not end soon, but the tide has shifted forever. In Moscow, Stalin allows himself a rare moment of satisfaction. His gamble, refusing to retreat, demanding the city be held at all costs, has paid off. The Red Army, battered and bloodied, has proven its resilience. The myth of Soviet weakness is dead, replaced by the legend of endurance. The victory at Stalingrad is not just military. It is psychological, political, spiritual. It breathes new life into a nation that had bled so much since 1941. I reflect on the human cost, and it crushes me. Nearly 2 million lives, soldiers, civilians, men, women, children, extinguished in this one city over the span of half a year. Numbers so vast they numb the mind, yet each number is a face, a voice, a life silenced. The frozen hell has ended, but its toll will echo for generations. As I walk deeper into these ruins, I realize that Stalingrad is no longer just a place or a battle. It has become a myth written in suffering. Soldiers whisper it in trenches, generals study it in maps, and civilians invoke it as both warning and inspiration. It is the moment where the war bent, where the hunter stumbled, where the victim became the victor. And yet, myths carry shadows. The Soviet triumph will fuel their advance, but it will also harden Stalin's resolve, his iron grip tightening as he demands ever more sacrifice. The German defeat will sow seeds of doubt in Hitler's command, but also seeds of fanaticism as he vows vengeance and scorched earth retribution. Stalingrad is not the end of suffering. It is the promise of more to come. I feel the weight of this city pressing on the future. Every ruined wall whispers of what is still ahead, the long push westward, the burning of villages, the march to Berlin, the iron curtain that will divide a continent. Stalingrad is the beginning of an ending, but also the birth of a new world, carved in blood and ice. As I stand in the silence of the ruined city, I cannot help but think of the survivors, German, Soviet, civilian. Each will carry Stalingrad inside them for the rest of their days. Some will never speak of it. Others will relive it in nightmares. And some will shape their nations with the memory, ensuring that this frozen hell is never forgotten. But history is not finished with Stalingrad yet. For even as the city smolders, both sides are already looking forward. The Germans, humiliated, are planning vengeance. The Soviets, emboldened, are preparing to push west. The war is not over. It is only entering a new, more terrible phase. And in the shadows of this victory, another question begins to emerge. What does survival mean when survival itself is a curse? The wind keens through the hollowed ruins like a dirge, carrying with it the smell of smoke, blood, and frost. Stalingrad has fallen silent, yet in that silence lies a weight heavier than any artillery barrage. Victory has been declared, banners raised, speeches made. But here, among the ruins, the true story is not celebration. It is survival, raw and merciless, and it haunts everyone who lived through the frozen hell. I walk with the German prisoners as they trudge eastward, their ranks a procession of shadows. Their faces are waxen, hollow, eyes sunk deep into skulls. Some stagger barefoot, their boots lost to frost or scavenged by others. They cling to scraps of cloth for warmth, some still clutching metals pinned to rags, as if the Iron Cross could shield them from the Siberian cold. Their journey is a slow-motion descent into another kind of death. Frost claims some before the first camp is reached. Disease claims more. Hunger gnaws at the rest. I hear them mutter of home, of wives and children, of bread, of warmth, words that taste like fantasies. For most, those words will never become reality again. The Soviets watch them march, a complex storm of emotions behind their eyes. Hatred burns in some. They remember villages burned, families shot, comrades massacred. Others watch with grim satisfaction, feeling justice in this misery. Yet some feel pity, a recognition that these gaunt figures are men like themselves, broken by the same winter, destroyed by the same war. Still, the column moves on. There is no mercy in war, not here, not now. Back in the city, the survivors of the Red Army emerge from the rubble. They are hailed as heroes, yet I see their eyes, bloodshot, hollow, haunted. They fought not only against the enemy, but against hunger, frost, exhaustion. They held cellars where bodies lay stacked in corners, fought in stairwells slick with blood, listened to comrades scream into silence. Now they stand in a city of ruins, and though the world calls it victory, they know what it cost. Some will never recover. Many will carry nightmares all their lives. The civilians of Stalingrad are ghosts as well. Women, children. The elderly crawl out of basements where they have lived like animals for months. Their cheeks are sunken, their eyes wide, their bodies wrapped in whatever cloth they could scavenge. They scavenge the ruins for food, for wood, for anything to keep them alive through the remainder of the winter. I hear a child laugh faintly as he finds a crust of frozen bread, and the sound feels both miraculous and heartbreaking. Life is fragile, stubborn, refusing to vanish entirely. For the Soviet leadership, this is a triumph beyond measure. Stalin seizes it with both hands, declaring that Stalingrad proves the indestructibility of the Soviet spirit. Propaganda posters rise across the nation, proclaiming the heroes of the UN. Volga songs are written, poems sung, films planned. The myth of Stalingrad is born even as the ruins still smolder. It is not just a military victory, it is a symbol, a rallying cry, a myth forged in frost and fire. But myths, I know, are double-edged. Stalingrad gives the Soviets hope, but it also gives Stalin justification for even harsher demands. If his people can endure this, they can endure anything. If the Red Army can win here, it can be driven forward, again and again, no matter the losses. The victory breathes life into the Soviet war machine, but it also tightens the iron hand around its people. In Berlin, the reaction is different. Rage, disbelief, denial. Hitler rants, his voice trembling with fury. He calls Paulus a coward, condemns the Sixth Army as weak, insists the defeat is only temporary. But behind his words lies fear. The myth of German invincibility has been shattered. The people whisper in cafes, in trains, in hushed tones at dinner tables. If the Sixth Army could fall, what else could crumble? The Reichstag may thunder with speeches, but doubt seeps into the cracks of the Reich like cold air through broken walls. And yet, paradoxically, this defeat does not weaken Hitler's grip, it strengthens it. He rages, but in his rage, he binds his people tighter, demanding even greater loyalty, even greater sacrifice. He vows vengeance, promises the Reich will rise again from the snow. His generals grow wary, but his fanaticism deepens. The road ahead, I sense, will only grow darker. I pause among the ruins, listening. The guns have stopped, but the city hums with whispers. Whispers of what comes next. The Soviets will march west, fueled by vengeance and newfound confidence. The Germans will fortify, desperate, fanatical, unwilling to admit defeat. And between them lies a continent that will burn for 2 more years. Yet for the men who survived, Soviet and German alike, Stalingrad is not history. It is a wound that will never heal. I imagine a soldier decades later, sitting in silence, staring at snow falling outside a window. He remembers the Volga frozen, remembers comrades turned to ice, remembers the screams that still echo in the back of his mind. His children will ask about the war, but his lips will tighten. Stalingrad will remain locked inside him, too heavy for words. The battle is over, but its echoes ripple outward, into strategy, into politics, into memory itself. Stalingrad has become more than a city, more than a battle. It is a turning point, a symbol of endurance and of ruin, a story that will be told and retold, each telling carrying its own myth, its own shadow. And as I stand in the silence of the frozen ruins, I sense that the war itself has shifted into something new. The hunter has stumbled. The hunted has found its strength. And from this moment on, every road leads not back, but forward, toward vengeance, toward escalation, toward an ending the world can scarcely imagine. But in the silence, another question whispers, if this is victory, what horrors will victory demand next? The city still lies in ruins, a jagged carcass on the banks of the Volga, but the war has already moved beyond it. I walk through the shattered streets in my mind, and though the fighting has ceased, the ground feels restless, as if it remembers. The snow hides corpses but cannot hide the memory of screams, the stink of death, the thunder of artillery. Stalingrad has been won, yet the victory bleeds into something larger, something that reshapes the very course of the war. From this ruin, the Red Army begins to surge westward. No longer is it a force merely surviving, retreating, or holding on. Stalingrad has given it new breath, a mythic certainty. The soldiers who emerge from the rubble carry scars, but also pride. They have destroyed the German spearhead. They have shown the world that the invincible can bleed, can break, can die. I feel their resolve harden like the frost beneath their boots. Each step they take westward is a step born of vengeance and memory. For the Germans, the wound is deeper than flesh. The Wehrmacht had believed itself untouchable, its blitzkrieg unstoppable. At Stalingrad, that illusion froze to death. Now their commanders whisper in corridors, their eyes averted, their faith in Hitler fraying. Yet Hitler himself grows more rigid, more fanatical. The defeat does not humble him, it inflames him. He lashes out, demanding loyalty, demanding sacrifice, promising vengeance. His empire is bleeding, but his pride blinds him to the truth. I hear his voice echoing across radios, declaring that Germany will rise again, that Stalingrad was only a temporary setback. But his people know better. Families receive letters that never mention the word surrender, only fallen with honor. Mothers weep behind closed doors. Wives stare at empty places at the table. An entire nation feels the shadow of Stalingrad, even as propaganda paints it as noble sacrifice. And yet, the cruelty of truth is that the suffering is far from over. For the Soviet Union, the victory does not mean respite, it means acceleration. Stalin now demands more. His commanders are ordered to press on, to chase the broken German armies across the steppe, to never relent. The Red Army, emboldened but battered, will be hurled again and again into the furnace. Their triumph at Stalingrad is glorious, but it is also a chain. They are trapped in the momentum of their own victory, and Stalin's iron will leave no room for hesitation. I walk in the imagination of villages far from Stalingrad, where peasants gather in candle-lit homes to hear the news on crackling radios. They weep with pride, with relief, with hope. They speak the name Stalingrad as if it is holy, a shield that will protect them from further loss. But they also know their sons will not come home. They know this war, far from ending, is only entering its most brutal years. The scale of what Stalingrad means spreads far beyond the front. In London and Washington, leaders read the reports with awe. For the Allies, it is proof that the Soviet Union can not only endure, but strike back. Plans take shape, strategies shift. The Second Front, once a debate, now looms as a promise. The world begins to imagine that Hitler can be beaten, that the Reich can fall. But in Berlin, another reality festers. The loss of the Sixth Army births not humility, but fanaticism. Hitler orders scorched earth policies, retreats forbidden, loyalty demanded unto death. He begins to see not soldiers, but pawns, not battles, but symbols. If Stalingrad was a symbol for the Soviets, it becomes one for him as well, but one twisted into obsession. The German people are told they must suffer, must bleed, must burn, for betrayal will mean annihilation. And so, the war mutates. From this frozen hell, it spills outward with renewed fury. The Eastern Front will become a cauldron, consuming millions more lives. Cities will burn, villages will vanish, and rivers will run red. Stalingrad is the hinge on which the entire war swings, turning the hunter into the hunted. Yet as I stand amid the ruins, I cannot escape the human ghosts who remain here, the soldiers who fought, the civilians who endured, the prisoners who march into silence. Their voices whisper from the rubble, telling me that Stalingrad was not just a turning point in war, it was a descent into something more primal, more terrifying. It revealed what humans will endure, what they will inflict, what they will sacrifice when forced into the jaws of annihilation. The frozen hell has ended, but the fire it has ignited will sweep across Europe. The Reich, though wounded, will strike back with desperation. The Soviets, emboldened, will push forward with ferocity. Between them, a continent will drown in blood. And so I leave the ruins of Stalingrad, but I do not leave its shadow. For even as I walk westward in my mind, I know the war is not easing. It is escalating. The world has passed a threshold, and there is no turning back. The snow falls softly on the silent city, but beneath that snow lies a prophecy. The war will only grow darker. The snow falls quietly now, blanketing the ruins of Stalingrad in white, as if winter itself seeks to cover the scars of what has been done here. But no amount of snow can erase them. Beneath the drifts lie hundreds of thousands of bodies, soldiers and civilians alike, entombed where they fell. Their silence is eternal, yet their story is not. For Stalingrad is not only the end of an army, it is the birth of a legend, one that will ripple across generations. I walk slowly through the streets in my mind, past factories with shattered windows, past apartments gutted by fire, past the twisted hulks of tanks and guns that lie half buried in the snow. This city is more than rubble. It is a monument carved not in stone, but in suffering. Each ruin speaks, each ruin remembers, and I hear the echoes of those who endured this frozen hell. For the Soviet Union, the victory is intoxicating. It becomes more than a military triumph. It is transformed into myth. Statues will rise, songs will be sung, films will be made. Schoolchildren will learn of Pavlov's house, of Chuikov's defiance, of the moment when the Red Army stood unbroken and turned the tide. Stalingrad becomes proof that the motherland is eternal, that sacrifice and blood can triumph over steel and fire. Yet behind the banners and the parades, the reality remains. This victory was bought at a price so terrible it defies comprehension. The Soviet dead number in the hundreds of thousands, their names whispered only by grieving families, their bodies lost beneath the ruins. For Germany, Stalingrad is a wound that never heals. The letters sent home speak of heroism and duty, but the truth cannot be disguised. An army has been annihilated, a myth destroyed. The invincibility of the Wehrmacht is shattered, its aura broken forever. In its place grows fear, doubt, and yet also fanaticism. Hitler will take this defeat and twist it, demanding ever greater sacrifices from his people, insisting that if they falter again, Germany itself will be annihilated. Stalingrad, in German memory, becomes not just a loss, it becomes a shadow that looms over the rest of the war, a reminder that the Reich is not invulnerable, yet bound by pride to fight harder still. And beyond these two nations, the world takes note. In London, in Washington, in every capital watching the struggle, Stalingrad is understood as a hinge. The tide has turned. The Reich can be beaten. The Soviet Union, once thought doomed, has proven itself a juggernaut of endurance. The road ahead will still claim millions, but the end is now imaginable. Stalingrad shows that Hitler can lose, that empires can bleed. I pause and listen to the voices of individuals, the ones history often drowns in numbers. A German soldier, captured, whispering his wife's name as he stumbles into captivity, never to return. A Soviet sniper, fingers cracked by frost, remembering the faces of those he killed as he stares at the dawn over the Volga. A child, orphaned, wandering through the ruins with wide eyes, clutching a ragged doll in numb silence. These are the true echoes of Stalingrad, the whispers beneath the banners, the truths behind the myths. Even decades later, the city will bear its scars. Memorials will rise, eternal flames will burn, but beneath them lies the memory of what human beings endured and inflicted here. Survivors will carry the battle in their silence. Some will write of it, some will dream of it. Many will never speak of it again. Yet Stalingrad will live within them, a frozen weight they cannot put down. I look at the Volga, frozen and silent, and I realize that the river carries not only water, but memory. The memory of barges carrying men into the fire, of shells splashing into its icy depths, of bodies drifting beneath the ice. That river flows still, carrying the story of Stalingrad forward, carrying it beyond borders, beyond time. And so, the question lingers. What does it mean? Was it victory? Was it tragedy? Was it myth or warning or both? Perhaps it is all of these. Stalingrad is proof of the heights and depths of human endurance, proof of how far men will go for survival, for orders, for vengeance, for pride. It is a mirror held up to humanity, and in that mirror, we see both greatness and horror staring back at us. As I step away from the ruins in my mind, I feel the chill of Stalingrad follow me. It is not the kind of story that ends. It is not the kind of place one leaves behind. It lingers, frozen, eternal, a scar carved into the century. The snow will melt, the city will rebuild, but Stalingrad will never fade. It will whisper to every generation. This is what war becomes when pride outweighs mercy, when orders matter more than lives, when survival itself becomes a curse. And so, I leave you with this final image, a city of ghosts beneath the snow, a silence heavier than any sound, a victory that feels like mourning. Stalingrad, frozen hell, eternal myth, warning forever etched into the soul of humanity. The battle has ended, but the echoes of Stalingrad will never die.